Good morning, students. We are going to start new chapter, chapter number 14, ecosystem. We will study following topics in this chapter: ecosystem, its structure and function, productivity, decomposition, energy flow, ecological pyramids, ecological succession, nutrient cycling, ecosystem services. An ecosystem can be visualized as a functional unit of nature where living organisms interact among themselves and also with the surrounding physical environment. So ecosystem is the unit which comprises of the living organisms and their interaction among themselves as well as with the surrounding. Ecosystem varies greatly in size from a small pond to a large forest or a sea. Many ecologists regard the entire biosphere as a global ecosystem, as a composite of all local ecosystems on Earth. Since this system is too much big and complex to be studied at one time, it is convenient to divide it into two basic categories, namely terrestrial and the aquatic. Forest, grassland and desert are some examples of terrestrial ecosystem. Pond, lake, wetland, river and estuary are some examples of aquatic ecosystem. Crop field and aquarium are also considered to be as man-made ecosystems. We will first look at the structure of ecosystem. In order to appreciate the input, that is productivity, transfer of energy from food chain or food web or nutrient cycling, the output, that is degradation and energy loss, we will also look at the relationships, that is cycles, chains, webs that are created as a result of this energy flow in the system and their interrelationships. First is ecosystem, its structure and function. In chapter number 13, you have looked at various components of the environment, whether they are abiotic, that is non-living, and biotic, that is living. You studied how the individual biotic and abiotic factors affect each other and their surrounding. Let us look at these components in a more integrated manner and see how the flow of energy takes place between them. Interaction of biotic and abiotic components result in a physical structure that is characteristic for each type of ecosystem. Identification and enumeration, पहचानना और उसे काउंट करना नंबर्स में, of plant and animal species of an ecosystem give its species composition. Vertical distribution of different species occupying different levels is called stratification. For example, trees occupy top vertical strata or layer of forest, shrubs, the second, and herbs and grasses occupy the bottom layers. The components of the ecosystem are seen to function as a unit when you consider the following aspects. First is productivity, whatever the produce is there. Second is decomposition. Third is energy flow. And fourth is nutrient cycling, in which the cycles of various nutrients like nitrogen, oxygen, carbon are considered. To understand the ethos of an aquatic ecosystem, let us take a small pond as an example. अगर हमें इकोसिस्टम समझना है तो हम पॉन्ड के एग्जाम्पल से इकोसिस्टम को समझने की कोशिश करेंगे. This is fairly a self-sustainable unit and rather simple example that explain even the complex interaction. ये सेल्फ सस्टेनेबल यूनिट है. याद रखिएगा, इकोसिस्टम हमेशा सेल्फ सस्टेनेबल होना चाहिए, यानी कि उसमें किसी भी एक्सटर्नल फैक्टर की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं होना चाहिए. वहाँ जो भी हैं, जितने भी फैक्टर्स हैं, वो अपने आप में सफिशिएंट होना चाहिए उस इकोसिस्टम को चलाने के लिए. इतना सिंपल इकोसिस्टम होने के बावजूद पॉन्ड इकोसिस्टम में, दिस एक्वाटिक इकोसिस्टम में इंटरैक्शंस बहुत ही ज़्यादा कॉम्प्लेक्स होते हैं. कम बायोटिक फैक्टर्स और कम एबायोटिक फैक्टर्स होने के बावजूद उनके जो इंटरैक्शंस हैं वो बहुत ही ज़्यादा कॉम्प्लेक्स होते हैं. अ पॉन्ड इज़ अ शैलो वाटर बॉडी इन विच ऑल द अबव फैक्टर्स आर मेंशन्ड are well exhibited. The abiotic component is the water with all the dissolved inorganic and organic substances. The rich soil deposit at the bottom of the pond. There are two abiotic factors. The solar input, cycle of temperature, day length and other climatic factors are also the abiotic components for an aquatic ecosystem like a pond. So the autotrophic components include phytoplanktons. Phyto means plants, plankton means that float on the surface of the water. So phytoplankton are the organisms that float on the surface of the water. Some algae and the floating submerged and marginal plants. Submerged means जो आधे पानी में डूबे हुए हैं और आधे पानी के बाहर हैं. Marginal plants means जो border पर grow करते हैं. They are found at edges. The consumers are represented by zooplankton, free-swimming and bottom-dwelling forms. The decomposers are fungi, bacteria, flagellates, especially abundant in the bottom of the pond. This system performs all the functions of an ecosystem. The four basic functions that we have studied earlier all are exhibited here in the pond, and hence it is considered as an individual self-sustainable ecosystem and of the biosphere as a whole. That is conversion of inorganic into organic material with the help of radiant energy of the sun by the autotrophs. Consumption of the autotrophs by heterotrophs, decomposition and mineralization of the dead matter to release them back for reuse by the autotrophs. These events are repeated over and over again. There is unidirectional movement of energy towards the higher trophic levels and its dissipation and loss as heat to the environment. We know that energy flow from autotroph to heterotroph, heterotroph to decomposers, and finally to the nutrient reservoirs. Next is the productivity. A constant input of the solar energy is the basic requirement for any ecosystem to function and sustain. Sustain मतलब रहना, survive करना. Primary production is defined as the amount of biomass or organic matter produced per unit area over a time period by plants during photosynthesis. It is expressed in terms of weight, that is per gram square, or energy, that is kilocalorie per meter square. The rate of biomass production is called productivity. It is expressed in terms of per gram square per year or kilocalorie per meter square per year to compare the productivity of different ecosystems. It can be divided into gross primary productivity GPP and the net primary productivity NPP. Gross primary productivity of an ecosystem is the rate of production of organic matter during photosynthesis. A considerable amount of GPP is utilized by the plants in respiration. Gross primary productivity minus respiratory loss is the net primary productivity. Equations come to be GPP minus R is equals to NPP. Net primary productivity is the available biomass for consumption to heterotrophs, that is herbivores and decomposers. Secondary productivity is defined as the rate of formation of new organic matter by the consumers. So primary is by producers and secondary is by consumers. Primary productivity depends on the plant species inhabiting in that particular area. It also depends on the variety of environmental factors, availability of the nutrients and photosynthetic capacity of plants. Therefore, it varies in different types of ecosystem. The annual net primary productivity of the whole biosphere is approximately 170 billion tons of dry weight of that organic matter. Of this, despite occupying about 70% of the surface, the productivity of the ocean are only 55 billion tons. Rest, of course, is on the land. Discuss the main reason for the low productivity of ocean with the teacher. So what is the reason behind it? The simple reason is that availability of light decreases in the ocean as we go more and more towards the depth of the ocean. Decomposition. You may have heard of the earthworm being referred to as the farmer's friend. This is so because they help in the breakdown of the complex organic matter as well as in loosening of the soil. Similarly, decomposers break down complex organic matter into inorganic substances like carbon dioxide, water and nutrients. The process is called decomposition. Dead plants remain such as leaves, bark, flowers, and dead remains of the animals, including fecal matter, constitute detritus, which is the raw material for decomposition. The important steps is the process of decomposition are fragmentation, leaching, catabolism, humification and mineralization. डिकम्पोजर्स जिस पर फीड करेंगे उसे डेट्रिटस कहेंगे, जिसके अंदर लीव्स हो सकती हैं, बार्क हो सकते हैं, फ्लावर हो सकते हैं, डेड रिमेन्स हो सकते हैं प्लांट्स और एनिमल्स के, फीकल मैटर हो सकता है. क्लियर. और जो स्टेप्स होंगे डिकम्पोजिशन के, उसमें पहला होगा फ्रेगमेंटेशन, जिसमें बड़े बड़े फ्रेगमेंट्स को छोटे फ्रेगमेंट्स में कन्वर्ट किया जाएगा. लीचिंग में उससे डिकम्पोज्ड हुए न्यूट्रिएंट्स को सॉइल में उतारने की कोशिश की जाएगी. कैटाबोलिज्म में केमिकली ब्रेकडाउन वाली रिएक्शंस होंगी. ह्यूमिफिकेशन में जो केमिकली ब्रेकडाउन होने के बाद न्यूट्रिएंट्स बनते हैं उन्हें सॉइल के साथ मिक्स किया जाएगा. एंड देन लास्ट विल बी मिनरलाइजेशन. Detrivores, example earthworm, break down detritus into small particles. Process is known as fragmentation. By the process of leaching, water-soluble inorganic nutrients go down into the soil horizon and gets precipitated as unavailable salts. Bacterial and fungal enzymes degrade detritus into simpler inorganic substances. Process is called catabolism. It is important to note that all the above steps in the decomposition operate simultaneously on the detritus. Humification and mineralization occur during decomposition in the soil. Humification leads to accumulation of dark colored amorphous substance called humus that is highly resistant to microbial action and undergoes decomposition at an extremely slow rate. Being colloidal in nature, it serves as a reservoir of nutrients. Humus is further degraded by some microbes and release inorganic nutrients that occur by the process called as mineralization. Decomposition is largely an oxygen requiring process. The rate of decomposition is controlled by the chemical composition of detritus and climatic factors. In a particular climatic condition, decomposition rate is slower if detritus is rich in lignin and chitin and quicker if detritus is rich in nitrogen and water soluble substances like sugar. So this you have to underline. कब decomposition rate कम हो जाएगा? जब lignin और chitin ज़्यादा हैं, क्योंकि वो जल्दी डिग्रेड नहीं होते हैं. बजाय उसके अगर प्रोटीन और कार्बोहाइड्रेट्स ज़्यादा होंगे तो उनका डिग्रेडेशन ईजी होगा. Temperature and soil moisture are most important climatic factors that regulate decomposition through their effects on the activities of soil microbes. Warm and moist environment favor decomposition, whereas low temperature and anaerobies inhibit decomposition, resulting in buildup of organic materials. Here is a diagrammatic representation of decomposition cycle in an terrestrial ecosystem. We can see how the leaves fall down from the trees. They die and become decaying. On that, worms start eating them. The same time, leaves partially consumed by the decomposers like fungi and bacteria, they begin to lose form and become litter. Further, it is decomposed by earthworm, bacteria and mites, fungi, etc. The same time, when some nutrients leach into the soil by chemical action, all these things reaches into the soil and soil becomes organic rich. This is how total decomposition is achieved.